the idea of compersion, loving your partner, really being excited about what excites them and being happy in their happiness. You don't have to be each other's stimulation for everything.
Every single thing.
And it takes actually so much pressure off of the relationship that you're building and allows it to be free on its own thing because it has so much more breathing room.
Right. You just be authentic, come from an organic place instead of being like, oh, I got to do this so that they feel happy.
Yeah. I mean, compersion really is, when practiced, the opposite of jealousy. But yeah, what you're speaking to, designing your own relationship, is something that I'm so passionate about, no matter what you want.
Have you guys done that in your relationship from the beginning? Because you said you went through open and polyamory, like you have done all of these things. That's really interesting to go through different shifts.
Yeah.
And how you made your relationship.
Yeah. I mean, it's all been pretty organic. This is such a good question, but it's been a journey. It started as an accident, and then it was like, oh, like, what do you want to try? And for a while it was just like a lot of conversations about like, what would be fun, what turns you on, and seeing like we had a lot of similar interests in the beginning. And then, some of our relationship being open was almost born out of meeting our needs realistically, which, actually I haven't talked about this too much, but when we first moved to LA, we were on completely different schedules. Like, Pasha worked like all the time. Like our schedule was, he worked all the time. And I was like, trying to do the actor thing when I first moved here. So I was like acting and I was like producing stuff, and I was in a ton of classes and shows and plays. And, I was up early in the morning and he was like working all night sometimes. So we weren't seeing each other a lot. And, he talks about this pretty openly, but he was on Adderall for a long time. He was prescribed Adderall and his sex drive was like plummeted. And he also was not around. And so
like when he is around, you're like, come give me something. He's like, all right,
yeah,
do it. And you're like, well, what is going on? Is it me?
Yeah. So like, luckily we had already started to like explore and experiment, and we weren't open until I would say 2 years in. And it was this like, almost, he was like, like you could like date other people. And I was like, huh? And he
brought that up to you
first? Yeah, to me first. Like,
Wow.
because at first it was just like threesomes. Like and I had like a really good girlfriend that we would like see often. And then like another one of my friends actually became kind of like, a frequent like visitor of ours. That those were like amazing times. And it was like this incubating period of like this non-monogamy, this like monogamish.
In a safe space, that self space. It felt safe for you guys.
Yeah. Like we were committed to each other. We weren't seeing other people. We were just like having these really fun experiences. And then like we would go to a party here and there. But it was the first time where he was like, babe, like I'm never home. And when I am, I'm sleeping. And he was also like, we were building a real estate business and building like a bunch of different businesses. And he's like, maybe you should like get on Tinder. And I was like,
you're like, huh?
I was like, almost, because still this is in the stages where I still had a lot of shame. It was like a huge secret. I didn't want anybody to know that we were like even having these threesomes. I remember like the first time I came out to like some of my best friends and they were like, what? And I was like, I know, don't tell anybody. Because it was like, it was very, very much.
Did anybody shame you for that or make you like, were like, how could you do that? Or were they kind of supportive, or over time got more supportive?
It was like a mix of, no one like openly shamed me for it, but I had so many people that were like, don't you think this is kind of dangerous? Or like, like be careful what you are doing. And a lot of my friends were like so supportive, and they were like, tell me more. Like, tell me how it works.
All the details. Yeah. I want to live vicariously through you. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of how we got to a place of dating other people. And, when you're doing these things together, for sure, it's a lot easier to everybody's different. I shouldn't say that. But for me, it was like, okay, I can see everything that's going on, which is a turn on for me when it's all like in the same space. Right. But then the idea of opening up and like doing something different without the other one there was definitely a trigger for a little bit more jealousy, a little bit more growth. And that's when like we had to start creating like relationship agreements and boundaries and like testing the waters of what was comfortable. And like maybe we were doing something and then we had to pull back because it was like, okay, I'm going on vacation and I'm like going to hook up with this girl. And then I was like, well, there was a lot of like, how does this feel?
Maybe
so much more like, I haven't been the most open, liberated, like everything's fine, let's do everything.
Yeah.
It was very much like, let's over assess and analyze every little thing, which sometimes was exhausting, but
you have to, I feel like that's really important. Like you have to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise you don't understand where the person's at. Yeah. I'd be like, I probably, if in that situation, would be like, you know what? You don't, no vacations.
Yeah.
Reel it back in, cancel that flight. You could stay right here. Go get a, like, you know what I mean? Like I would be like, that's not okay, but this is okay.
Yeah.
I feel comfortable with this. It would be a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, the wind up for me was, luckily in my open experience, like I found out that was even more like of a desire piece for me, like knowing that there was like something amazing happening and like being kind of waiting for because Pasha and I tell each other everything. So it's like, I've said this before, it's like your real live, like erotic audio
so you
book
share the experiences that you had individually.
Yeah. Like he would come home and like tell me about these things and I would just be like dying. It was like, there's no greater turn on for me. What I found out, something that I was a little bit scared to do. And like, coming from such a place of like monogamy is the only way. And, the way I was raised, it was very much like, jealousy, like it becomes kind of limited. And you see that as a pattern where people they fell in love with a person. This is what I was sold essentially. Right. And then when someone starts to change, you notice, oh, that love was actually pretty conditional upon who you were.
Right.
When we were 27. And actually, this is one of the things that Pasha and I actually have like gone to therapy for, is the idea of that we grew into such different people than like when
love
we
that you
met.
went to therapy for that. That is so cool.
And
a lot of people don't do that.
It's therapy. PSA, therapy will save your marriage. And like, we've never like gone to therapy for like the, open things or the, we've talked about it with our therapist to give context of like, our relationship's pretty different. So like we have these other people, but it's more just like the communication piece, the unconditional love, like, the idea of compersion, which is something that, we were talking about, is like loving your partner and really being excited about what excites them and being happy in their happiness. It comes from a Sanskrit word, actually. Well, I don't know if it's like from that word, but there's another word called mudita. And it's like the first time I ever heard about like delighting in others' success, right? And so we have this term compersion to mean whatever makes you happy is then going to make me happy because of my unconditional love for you.
Right. And you're happy instead of being miserable.
Yeah.
Like, that makes sense. With the compersion though, it's not basically just on like an open relationship and romantic or flirting or sexual, like, that kind of exchange. It's anything, correct?
It's anything. Yeah.
Which I think a lot, again, that's the fear of like not having the fear of, I got this job, I want to do this, or I want to go and start rock climbing or doing something and traveling all over. And your partner's like, wait, so you're gonna be traveling now and going rock climbing for fun for you? What about me? Where it's like, no, go and do that. That's what's going to make you happy and come back, be a better person for me because you're happy. I'm not trying to like, oh, no, you can't go anywhere. Stay here. Like, that's not fair. I don't believe in that. Having a relationship based on conditions, love based on conditions, I don't agree with that because I feel like that's really hard. I personally haven't experienced that where if you don't do this, I'm not happy. If you did this, I'm not happy. I really thought it was my fault that somebody was not happy. It had nothing to do with me. Yeah. And I had no clue. So now I'm like, no, I'm going to love you no matter what. And I think that's the thing in relationships too, is really, truly loving and understanding somebody, because this is just anything could happen in any relationship. But say I'm with somebody and I'm married and they cheat on me. You can work through those things and understand that person, where they come from. Don't just throw everything you have away. I don't believe in that, but you have to be open and willing to do the work. And that's really confrontational.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't have that. So it's like, there's such a strength in that you guys have that too.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm actually so glad that you brought it to that, because I think that the idea, we were talking about Esther Perel talks about this a lot. Yep. People throw away like these beautiful relationships over like one infidelity. So like 25 years of a partnership and a family, just because someone cheated. And that's like an incident that you can think about, but this happens all the time in relationships where somebody does one thing wrong and then like it cracks the foundation, people think, but it really it's kind of like that trigger. it cracks like your idea of love, which usually doesn't come from an unconditional place. It comes from a place of like, I need this to look like this in order for me to feel happy and whole. Because people are like holding together kind of like their wounded places. But the idea that someone else doing anything like rock climbing trips or whatever could be the thing that makes them happy and it doesn't have anything to do with you is scary for people. And this this will be a whole other episode actually. So like this is the precursor to that episode. But I think that many people, they have the idea that they should meet all of their partner's needs. And so that's why that shows up. It's like, well, you should derive like your happiness and anything that you need like from me.
Just
you should
from me,
be
nothing
seeking
else.
it from outside sources. I wrote this whole talk called Your Partner's Not Your Superhero about this. And then, the idea that you wanting to be all those things and needing to be all those things is so exhausting. And this is not just like sexually, like, you asked me, it's like, let them get fulfillment with like their workout buddies or their career thing or their mastermind or whatever, even like their church or their community or their spirituality. And then you come together and nurture the piece that's like your romantic connection.
Right.
You don't have to be each other's stimulation for everything.
Every single thing.
And it takes actually so much pressure off of the relationship that you're building and allows it to be free on its own thing because it has so much more breathing room.
Right. You just be authentic, come from an organic place instead of being like, oh, I got to do this so that they feel happy. I got to do this. It's like, then it's not flowing the way it should. You're kind of putting these limits where it's like, if I don't do this, they're not going to be happy and vice versa.
Yeah.
And
cheers to that.
That doesn't always work.
Relationships should flow. They should be. I mean, and they're not always are, but like.
No, they're not.
When you strive for like effortlessness and like, stop trying to push
and
so much and control. This is like the whole theme of this.
And it makes it feel safe for both of us because it's not like, well, if you don't do this or if you do this, I'm not happy. I don't love you. I don't want to be with you. It's nothing to do with that at all. But we also communicate and we trust each other. And with that, you just start building a really, really strong foundation so that when something does come up, and it does, and it will, because that's a relationship, you're not like, I can't do this and throw everything away where it's like, it doesn't always work like that. It doesn't have to. And I think a lot of people, it's fear-based and they're scared to do that. And it's like, there's somebody who's like, I'm willing to work on this. Like I want to with you and support you. And a lot of people don't do that because they see it from you're growing, stay, and it's like compersion is actually a really great thing. Like allow people to have their freedom to do what they want in knowing too that they love you and communicate. And that helps build a really strong foundation with each other. So when these things happen, you're not like, oh, he's leaving me because he's going rock climbing again. It sounds random, but it's like, you know what I mean? But it's like one of those things where it's like that you might connect that because of it might trigger something.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you don't share those things, you're, how do you get through it?
Yeah. I mean, compersion really is when practiced the opposite of jealousy.